Throughout its history, Elden Ring has had its fair share of completely busted and broken weapons, and history seems to be repeating itself because in the DLC, there is a brand new weapon that is capable of destroying every single boss in the game in about 5 seconds. I'm not joking when I say that this build I'm going to show you today is quite possibly the most broken and the most overpowered one that I have ever personally used. So before From Software nerf this thing, let me show you the weapon and the best build around it. Of course, the weapon that is dealing this crazy amount of damage is none other than the lightning perfume bottle, and it is once again a brand new weapon type that has been introduced by Shadow of the Erdtree. But to do the crazy amount of damage, we're also using one of the new Ashes of Wars that have been introduced in the DLC, and both the new Ash of War and the perfume bottle can be obtained without having to defeat any bosses, meaning that you can make this build pretty much as soon as you enter the DLC. So I'm just going to very quickly show you how you get both of those items, and for the weapon itself, it is located in this kind of like little lake that I'm highlighting on the map for you now, and the quickest and easiest way to get to this location as soon as you load up the DLC is first of all making your way to the castle front site of Grace, to then head right or east towards the pillar path cross site of Grace. But just before you reach the pillar path cross site of Grace, there is going to be a sort of cliff face that you can drop down onto various different platforms. Use those platforms to go down into the canyon below, and then once you reach the bottom you will see a little opening to a cave. Go through that cave, and on the other side if you hang left, and you will come to a much bigger cave where again you can go straight through this, do the various jumping puzzles, to which you will come out to a much bigger opening, and you should be able to see a fire furnace boss. But instead of heading in that direction, if you wrap around to the left once more, you will then be going through the forest with a bunch of lightning goats, and when you get to the lake in this area, the lightning perfume bottle will be on this body in the middle of the lake. But like I say, it's not the only thing that we need to collect, because we do in fact need to get ourselves an Ash of War to help with this perfume bottle, because essentially the Ash of War we're going to use is what is going to deal that insane damage I showed you earlier. And the Ash of War in question is going to be the Rolling Sparks Ash of War, which is only used on perfume bottles, and that is located right here just in front of the Shadow Keep area on top of this hill to the right. And again, to get to this particular area without killing any bosses, if you start jumping down that same cliff face by the pillar path cross site of Grace that we used to go down and get the perfume bottle, but instead of going through that cave again, if you head up this path and carry on wrapping around the side of the cliff, you will be able to come to this area where there's going to be a spirit spring that is currently locked, but luckily for us, the object that we need to destroy to unlock it is just right next to it. And once you unlock this spirit spring, if you use it, it will then lift you up to the Fort of Reprimand, and if you just simply walk out the front gate, you will be able to head north past the Morph ruins, and more specifically towards Shadow Keep. But like I say, just before you actually enter Shadow Keep, there will be this kind of like bandit camp area with yet another fire giant sat in the middle. But if you climb the hill that's on the right, there's actually going to be a silver scarab that is flying in the sky, so you will need to use a ranged weapon to knock it down, and upon defeating it you will get the Rolling Sparks Ash of War. So now that we've got both of these items, you can use regular smithing stones to upgrade the lightning perfume bottle to its max, and then once it's fully upgraded, make sure that you apply the Rolling Sparks Ash of War to it, because the reason why this is integral for our build is with the Rolling Sparks Ash of War, it will allow us to spread that sort of like perfume effect in a straight line, to which 7 or 8 explosions will happen in that trail that we leave. But the beautiful thing about this is we can actually use it at our enemies' feet to make the explosions happen much quicker. So the caveat with this Ash of War is not to actually use it as it's intended, because enemies can of course just walk past the trail or dodge it. So to make sure that every explosion hits our enemies, we are essentially using it on the floor just in front of our enemies or at their feet, and with one of those explosions doing around about 2,000 to 3,000 damage with minimal buffs, that is how we're doing the crazy damage that you're seeing on screen, which essentially allows us to defeat every single boss in the game, including all DLC bosses, in a matter of about 5 seconds. But of course I need to tell you the stats you require in order to wield this weapon correctly and mimic the damage you're seeing on screen. So as I throw the stats on screen, as per usual, it it is going to be a level 150 character, as that is the level that we delve into with all of our builds on the channel. And as you can see, we've got 50 points into Vigor, 18 Mind, 21 Endurance, 10 Strength, 50 Dexterity, 10 Intelligence, 60 Faith, and 10 Arcane. Now those 10s in Strength, Intelligence, and Arcane are actually my base stats. That is because I started my character as a Wretch build, so essentially we do not level Strength, Intelligence, or Arcane at all. And where the Lightning Perfume bottle has a slightly better scaling with Faith, we of course pump most of our points into our Faith value, but we also pump up our Dexterity because it also has a C scaling in Dexterity when you fully upgrade this weapon. As although we've got a low amount of Mind, the Rolling Sparks Ash of War doesn't actually take up too much FP, and the 21 Endurance allows us to use more than enough of a heavier armor while still remaining in the medium weight gain, so we can at least medium roll everywhere, and 50 points worth of Vigor is more than enough because essentially if for whatever reason you do trade a hit or two whilst going up against certain bosses, that will be enough to survive at least 1 or 2 hits, because I'll be completely honest, the enemy will be dead by the time they get their second swing in. But again, in order to do this absolutely broken amount of damage, we do need to be using the right talismans as well, and of course where we're going to be utilizing the Ash of War as our main damage output, it is in our best interest to run the Shard of Alexander, as that will boost our damage output with 15% whenever we do use the Rolling Sparks attack. But again, where this new weapon is a Perfume bottle, we do actually benefit from the Perfumer's Talisman, which will boost our damage output with any attacking moves by 20%, and yes, that does include all of the damage that we deal with this particular weapon. But again, where it's also lightning damage, we will benefit greatly by running the Lightning Scorpion Charm, as that will boost our overall damage output once again by 12%. And then for the final talisman, we're actually going to be using a new one that has been implemented in the DLC, and that is going to be the Aged One's Exaltation. And this particular talisman will increase all of our damage outputs by 20% again whenever Madness procs in our near vicinity. Now I am just actually going to show you where you get this talisman, because it is kind of a little bit of a secret, because you do need to make your way to the Abyss area in this DLC, and in order to do that you need to fully go through the Dark Light Catacombs area and beat the boss at the end of that. But once you've beaten that boss and come to the Abyss area, you then need to come to this specific section, and in this sort of like particular pond area there will be an Aged One roaming around, and he is the one you need to defeat in order to get the talisman. Now I've already defeated him in my playthrough, so I can't show him dropping it, but in order to defeat the Aged Ones you need to parry his attack that insta-kills you, because once you parry him they will then become vulnerable and you can just defeat them super easily. So just make sure that you do that on the Aged One in the location I showed you a moment ago, and once you defeat him you will get your hands on this talisman. But of course the talismans are the only thing boosting our damage output, as we can also run certain incantations and more importantly boost our damage through the Wonder Physick. And just to give you the Wonder Physick combination first, I highly recommend that you run both the Lightning Shrouding Crack tier as well as the Dexterity Knot tier, as you'll get the extra 20% lightning damage and the plus 10 to dexterity, increasing our AR with the weapon itself. But of course we've also got those 60 points in Faith, and that will allow us to run both Golden Vow and the Howl of Shibiri to give us a plus 15% extra damage boost and plus 25% extra damage boost respectively. But more specifically with the Howl of Shibiri, that is super important to use, as this is how we are going to proc the Madness in order to get the benefits from the Aged One's Exaltation Talisman. So essentially before you go into any fight, make sure that you fully proc Madness on yourself by using the Howl of Shibiri multiple times, and as long as you've actually fully procced Madness you'll get the extra 20% damage buff from the Aged One's Exaltation. And essentially with all of these buffs active, that is how you're going to be doing the crazy damage that you're seeing in the background. But I do just want to point out that this is not the maximum amount of damage, because if you want to be a little bit more risky with your gameplay, you can indeed put on the Rakshasa armor, and for every piece of the armor that you put on, you will increase the amount of damage that you deal, but at the cost of decreasing your damage negation. So essentially you'll deal more damage, but you'll also take more damage. Also, there is a brand new crack tier called the Blood Sucking Crack tier that will increase your overall damage output by 20%, but it will gradually reduce your HP, which can indeed kill you if you're not paying attention and let your health run down to 0. But of course, like I say, if you want to run the risk of having that gradual HP deduction as well as the decreased damage negation, then definitely run the armor and swap out the Dexterity Knot tier for the Blood Sucking Crack tier. But to be completely honest with you guys, this build does more than enough damage as it is and really doesn't need to be heightened any further, so you don't overly need to run that risk, as you're seeing in the gameplay in the background, we're essentially two-shotting every single mainline boss. And as I mentioned earlier, this damage does transfer over to the DLC. I know I'm not showing too much gameplay from the DLC, mainly because I don't want to spoil it for you guys, but even with the build set up as it is, the final boss in the DLC can be defeated with just 3 uses of the Ash of War. So if you are struggling with the DLC at all, I highly recommend that you delve into this build, as you will be able to simply walk through every single boss fight. And if you are watching this within sort of like the first week or two of the DLC, I highly recommend that you try and use this now, because I would be very surprised if this does not get nerfed by From Software. I very highly doubt that they intended for this weapon to deal as much damage as it does, so as I say, definitely use this build whilst you can, especially if you're struggling with the DLC. But this is essentially how you create the best build around the lightning perfume bottle, which is now quite possibly the most broken weapon that we have ever seen in Elden Ring. So yeah, there you have it. That is how you create the best build around the lightning perfume bottle. Of course, this isn't going to be the most fun build that you will ever use, as it will just break the game entirely. But as I just mentioned, if you're struggling with the DLC, or you're trying to go for like the world record as to how much damage you can deal with just one attack, then this is definitely the weapon to use and the build to go for. But other than changing your armor and having the blood sucking tier in this build, feel free to let me know any suggestions on how you can make this build even better. Of course, things like the black dumpling helm will also be extremely useful in this build. But other than that, if you happen to like this video or found this build interesting in any way, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like button, it helps out the channel tremendously, and it's also the easiest and quickest way to let me know that you want to see more crazy builds like this. Of course, there are still loads of weapons for us to discover and make crazy builds on from the DLC, and I've got many more of those videos coming out in the near future. So if you also want to stick around and you're not subscribed already, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below too, and that way you'll be notified whenever we do release another insane build like this. But for now, I'm not going to waste any more of your time, because like I say, this is probably going to get nerfed, so get onto this now and definitely use it whilst you can. But other than that, just wanted to say a big thank you for watching, and I guess I'll catch you in the next video of whatever it is that we make. Bye bye.